Hi, my name is Lisa Anderson, President of LMA Consulting Group and host of Supply Chain Chats. I'm thrilled to be here with you today to talk about supply chain vulnerabilities and what we should be doing about it. It's certainly come up multiple times in the news, and so we really have to put some emphasis on addressing these concerns. So, for example, the recent attacks in the Middle East, where hundreds of pagers used by the Iran-backed Hezbollah exploded in Lebanon and Syria. Several people died, but also it's exposed really significant supply chain risks. Do you know who everybody is in your supply chain? Who is your supplier's supplier? And do you know whether you can count on them, whether there's vulnerabilities, etc.? It's a really serious question. The second example, is the hurricane. Hurricane Helene destroyed many East Coast states, or at least parts of states and towns. It's exposed some supply chain vulnerabilities as well. So, for example, Baxter has its largest manufacturing site in Marion, North Carolina, where they make 60% of the U.S. supply of dialysis solutions and IV fluids. And they were flooded out, and they're assessing the damage and trying to figure out what they need to do to come back online. Well, that's going to be a significant challenge because they supply 60% of the U.S. healthcare system with this product. So what are they going to do? What can they do to recover? What can we do to back that up? And it just exposes those vulnerabilities. In another North Carolina town that was devastated by the hurricane, they have high-quality quartz. And high-quality quartz is used in several things, but it's used in the production of semiconductors. And that's highly problematic because semiconductors are used for medical devices, items related to national defense, electronics, etc. So what are we going to do without all the materials we need? Again, supply chain vulnerabilities within our spectrum here. And then last but not least is the port strike going on in the East Coast and Gulf Coast ports. It could have a massive economic impact, and they're far apart in terms of the pay raises requested versus the pay wages that are offered to date. There's really actually been very little negotiations going on for quite some time because they're so far apart. Also, there's a request to ban automation, which is really concerning because we've been experiencing high inflationary periods, which relate to both of these topics. And our ports are some of the least productive ports in the world. So how are we going to bridge this divide and be successful from a supply chain point of view? That is the question. So these are three examples exposing supply chain vulnerabilities related to things from war to weather. What do we do? Well, there's a lot of things we can do, but I'm going to keep this relatively short and give you some top of mind suggestions, then we'll return back for another session shortly. First of all is let's assess the supply chain, find out who is your supplier's supplier. Let's hope you know, but a lot of companies don't. So who are you dependent upon? Can you depend upon them? Who's the highest risk? What are you going to do about it? And are you dependent on enemies, for example? Are you dependent on regions that are war-torn? Are you dependent on regions that have a lot of weather events? These are things you can assess your risk. So look at your supply chain, figure out what your risks are, and then start doing something about it. You can start with a backup supplier at the bare minimum. You want to make sure that your backup supplier you're using on a constant basis, otherwise they will not be there when you need them. Hopefully they're going to be in a different region because otherwise they could be affected by any of the same issues that brought up the first problem. You also want to be looking at expanding and diversifying your supply base. Very importantly, you want to look at nearshoring production to friendly places, which is also called friendly shoring. But you got to be careful because you got to worry about energy, water, other ports that can get shut down along the way. So you don't just overreact and go to somewhere else that causes another problem. You have to look at the whole situation from a common sense point of view and evaluate it and move forward. You also really should be reshoring, expanding manufacturing capability in like the US, Europe as an example, and even vertically integrating where it makes sense. Again, refer back to common sense and do some quick assessments and start taking action. You've got to bring your supply chain where you can make sure that you can make sure your quality control is successful throughout your supply chain. Start looking at evaluating additional partners And they really should be more like strategic partners, not vendors. And you should be looking at formalizing your relationships as well, because after all, you have to be able to count on these folks long term. And last but not least, be thinking about putting in a SIOP program sooner versus later. SIOP is Sales Inventory Operations Planning, and it'll help to keep you ahead of changing conditions in your demand, your customer base, because they can be impacted by all of these events, as well as your supply side. So your reallocation of capacity, your suppliers, there's all sorts of things you should be looking at to make sure that you can be successful long term. You can get more information about that and download a complimentary ebook on rolling out SIOP on our website, and that's LMA-consultinggroup.com/SIOP to get some additional information. We'll join you again next time. Thank you.